Bandera is an awkward, stubborn, and fanatical Slav. He is so devoted to his ideas that he is willing to die for them. At this stage, he is extremely valuable to us, but later can become very dangerous. He has the same hate for Russians as for Germans. This is how SS General Gottlieb Berger described Stepan Bandera, leader of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, when he refused to collaborate with the Germans. Stepan Bandera was born on the 1st of January in 1909 in the village of Stary Uhrinyu in the western region of Ukraine known as Галичина, during which time was a territory of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Stepan came from a large, reputable family with educated parents. His father Andriy also served as a priest after having received a degree in theology from Lviv University. The Bandera family belonged to the Ukrainian intelligentsia and were often visited by educated people and public figures with very clear political affiliations. Their household was imbued with the spirit of Ukrainian patriotism, a deeply rooted love for Ukraine, and the desire to fight to the end for her freedom. Undoubtedly, the constant foreign occupation of his homeland and scenes of blood and violence left their mark on young Stepan. He was only 5 years old when the First World War began, and between 1914 and 1917, he witnessed the tug-of-war on his land between the Austro-Hungarian and Russian empires, which resulted in a territory change of 4 times within that short period. The year 1917 brought with it the bloody Bolshevik Revolution, and while the following year saw the creation of the West Ukrainian People's Republic, in 1919, aggression from Poland caused a war which resulted in complete Polish occupation of Western Ukraine. On many occasions, the Bandera's home, as many other Ukrainian homes, experienced shelling from enemy bombs. In addition to the carnage around him, at the age of 12, Stepan suffered the loss of his mother due to tuberculosis. His father was left to raise a family of 7 children on his own. While a bright and passionate child, Stepan was physically sickly, having been diagnosed with a painful condition known as rheumatism of the joints. He oftentimes could not walk or feel his legs. Yet his determination to avenge Ukraine was so strong that even at such a tender age, Stepan would indulge in self-flagellation to see if he could withstand torture in the event of capture. In 1924, Stepan learned of the martyrdom of Olha Basarab, a communications agent in the Ukrainian military organization, which was part of the Ukrainian liberation movement. Olha was responsible for creating the first female platoon within the Ukrainian Riflemen's Unit. She was eventually found one morning in her prison cell, hanged on a traditional Ukrainian embroidered towel. She managed to scratch on the prison wall, "I am dying, tortured, revenge." Stepan Bandera took these words to heart and would make sure to carry out Olha's last wishes. Several months later, after a lengthy battle to retrieve Olha's body, doctors were able to determine her death was not a suicide, but in fact staged. After graduating school in 1927, Stepan planned to attend the Ukrainian College of Technology and Economics in Podebrada in Czechoslovakia, but the Polish authorities did not grant him travel papers. In 1928, Stepan passed his entrance exams and was enrolled in the agronomy program at the Lviv Polytechnic University, one of the few programs open to Ukrainians at the time. This was due to restrictions placed on minority enrollment by the Polish government, aimed primarily at Jews and Ukrainians in both secondary schools and university-level institutions. However, his time there was short-lived as he was arrested by the Polish authorities who controlled Western Ukraine at the time. They justifiably suspected Stepan Bandera of being a member of the Ukrainian military organization OUN, also known as the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, which he joined in 1928. Having started out as an ardent activist, Stepan eventually became the organization's primary ideologist. The goal was to fight for the independence of Ukraine by any means possible. In 1934, the Polish authorities arrested Stepan again for nationalistic activities and sentenced him to life in prison. While there, Stepan commenced a 16-day-long hunger strike. Reports from guards confirm that Stepan was so weak he needed to rely on the walls to remain upright. At that time, prison authorities would resolve to forcibly feeding liquid sustenance through prisoners' nostrils. Unexpectedly, he got out after only 3 years of imprisonment due to the Nazi attack on Poland in 1939. Even though the German authorities initially promised to help Ukraine gain independence and fight the Russian communists, 2 years later they also arrested Stepan, along with others, for nationalistic activism. In 1939, Western Ukraine was given to the USSR under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, also known as the Nazi-Soviet Pact. The result was horrendous on the Bandera family. Stepan's sisters Oksana and Marta Maria were arrested by the NKVD, or Soviet secret police, in 1941 and sent to a gulag in Siberia. His father was shot. And because Bandera refused to work for the Nazis, his brothers Oleksandr and Vasily were arrested and interned in Auschwitz. They were especially abused because of their family name, and in 1942 they were killed by Polish inmates. Another brother, Bogdan, would also eventually be shot by the Gestapo. The Nazis eventually also sent Stepan to the concentration camp at Sachsenhausen, where other influential Eastern Europeans were being held for whatever plans the Nazis would deem as useful to their cause. Once he was released, he could not return to Ukraine, as Stepan was considered an enemy of the Soviet state. Thus, he was forced to emigrate to Germany. Eventually, he began to work for the British Secret Service and completely immersed himself in the activity of UPA, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. Unlike competing Polish, Russian, Hungarian, or Romanian nationalistic movements of the time, Ukrainian nationalism did not include anti-Semitism as a core aspect of its program. Members of UPA were faced with two enemies, the fascists from the west and communist invaders from the east, inevitably causing Ukraine to be stuck between a rock and a hard place. Stepan Bandera's movements were constantly being monitored as he was pursued by the military police. Many attempts were made on his life, and in 1959, one succeeded. On October 15th, at the threshold of his Munich apartment, Bandera was shot by Bogdan Stashinsky, an employee of the Soviet secret police known as the KGB, and Soviet party leader Nikita Khrushchev. A special weapon, a gun loaded with cyanide, was used in his assassination. To this day, the life and persona of Stepan Bandera continue to stir up controversy. For those suffering from communist nostalgia, Bandera is ignorantly branded a fascist and collaborator. This is most likely due to a commonplace social nuance which took root in the Soviet Union during the Second World War, which was to refer to a non-communist compliant person or idea as fascist or an enemy of the state. Moreover, the Soviet school curriculum included propaganda aimed at vilifying nationalistic individuals. Eventually, Bandera's name became synonymous with the label and was used to refer to anyone who fought for individual rights as well as the rights of a sovereign state. Even decades after the fall of communism, Soviet sympathizers still use the terms fascist and Bandera interchangeably to refer to someone who defies government regulations. This only serves to prove the intensity of Bandera's influence on both his enemies and followers. And for most Ukrainians, his name is so revered that it borders a cult-like following. To be called a Bandera is most certainly welcome among nationalists and only serves to reaffirm the passion for Ukrainian culture and ultimate independence. Stepan Bandera once said, "Freedom is not free. It is often paid for in one's blood." From an early age, Stepan decided that his life would be dedicated to Ukraine, and he realized the consequences by paying in his own life. Slava Ukraini! Glory to Ukraine!